So, why do some kids stick to the straight and narrow while others get into really serious trouble? Well, to get to the bottom of this, we're not going to start with some dry theory. We're going to start with a story. A story about a robbery that went horribly, horribly wrong.
Okay, so picture this. It's 2014. 3 teenage gang members drive 50 miles because they think they're about to rob a drug house. But they got the wrong address. They break into the home of a retired couple, pistol whipping the husband and stabbing his wife. It was just a brutal, senseless act that all started with a mistake. The 2 teens who survived were eventually sentenced to 56 years in prison.
And that really makes you wonder, right? What leads a young person to a place where a violent home invasion seems like a reasonable choice? Is it something inside them, or is it something about the world they grew up in? Sociologists have been wrestling with this for ages, and they've basically come up with 2 major explanations. All right, let's dive into this. The whole debate really just boils down to 2 big competing ideas about what makes a young person go off the rails. So on one side, you've got the argument that it's all about where you live. This is what's called social structure theory, and it suggests that things like poverty, a rundown neighborhood, or just not having opportunities, those are the real culprits. But then, on the other side, you've got this idea that it's all about who you know. That's social process theory, and it argues that your day-to-day interactions with your family, your friends, your teachers, that's what really shapes your path. So which one is it? Let's dig into the first idea. So, could delinquency actually be written into your zip code? The social structure argument says, yeah, pretty much. And it's got some really powerful evidence to back it up. The core idea here is that society isn't some level playing field. It's stratified. People are grouped into different classes based on their wealth and power. And for the people at the bottom, life is just a constant struggle. This theory argues that all that stress, that despair, and the total lack of options that come with poverty, well, that can be a perfect recipe for crime. And within this big idea, there are actually 3 main branches. So let's take a quick look at each one. First up, we have social disorganization. I want you to picture a neighborhood where the basic building blocks, families, schools, local shops, are all weak or have just completely broken down. In a place like that, there's no one around to exert that kind of informal control. Nobody's telling kids to get off the corner, nobody's stopping them from spray painting a wall, and without those community guardrails, a space just opens up for illegal behavior to really take root. Now, check this out because this slide visualizes the idea perfectly. Way back, some sociologists named Shaw and McKay mapped out delinquency in Chicago and found this exact pattern. Crime rates were always, and I mean always, highest in that zone in transition, that unstable, kind of decaying area right outside the main business district. And here's the crazy part. It was true no matter which ethnic group was living there at the time. This was a huge deal because it showed that the problem wasn't the people, it was the place. Okay, the second idea is called strain theory. It basically argues that our culture tells all of us to want the same things. Wealth, success, the nice car. But here's the catch. It doesn't give everyone the same legitimate ways to get those things. And that gap between the American dream and a person's reality, it creates this intense frustration or strain, especially for people in the lower class.
And a sociologist named Robert Merton actually laid out 5 different ways people respond to the strain. As you can see here, most of us are conformists. We buy into the goals and we follow the rules to get there. But look down at innovation. This is someone who still wants all the wealth and success, but they reject the normal ways of getting it, like a 9-to-5 job. For them, crime can start to look like a totally rational path to success. And that's the one most closely tied to delinquency.
Okay, so that's the whole neighborhood argument. But what if the real cause of delinquency is way more personal? Let's flip the coin and look at how a totally different theory explains all this. Social process theories completely flip the script. They argue that really anyone, no matter their race or their class, has the potential to become a delinquent. What really matters are those everyday interactions, that whole process of socialization. If your family, your friends, and your school are teaching you to break the law, chances are you probably will. It's about what you learn, not what you lack. One of the most powerful ideas here is social control theory. And I love this one because it flips the question completely on its head. Instead of asking, why do people commit crime? It asks, wait a minute, why don't more people commit crime? And the answer, it says, is our bonds to society. These bonds act like anchors, holding us to doing the right thing.
And when those anchors snap, we're free to just drift into delinquency. So the very first bond is attachment. This is basically our connection to other people. And it makes sense, right? When we care about our parents or our friends, we care about what they think of us. We really don't want to disappoint them, and that's a seriously powerful force holding us back from doing things we know we shouldn't.
Second, you have commitment. This is all about your stake in the game. When you've poured your time and energy into getting good grades, or saving up for a car, or just building a good reputation, well, you have a lot to lose. Delinquency suddenly becomes way too risky because it could just blow up everything you worked so hard for. Third, we've got involvement. This one's pretty straightforward, honestly. If you're busy, you just don't have time to get into trouble. I mean, if you're juggling homework and sports practice and a part-time job and family dinners, there's just not much room left on your schedule for delinquency. And finally, the fourth bond is belief. This is the moral dimension. Do you actually believe the rules are fair and that they should be obeyed? If a person's belief in the moral compass of society is weak, they're going to feel a whole lot freer to just ignore it. So, we've got two big explanations going head-to-head, your neighborhood versus your network. Let's really put them to the test and see how they stack up when we apply them to a real and very controversial case.
You might remember this one. In 2013, a wealthy teenager from Texas named Ethan Couch killed 4 people in a drunk driving crash. At his trial, his lawyers made a shocking argument that became infamous. They said Couch suffered from affluenza. They actually claimed his rich parents had coddled him so much that he literally never learned the connection between actions and consequences. And the judge bought it. He was sentenced to just probation. So how on earth do our theories make sense of that?
Well, if we look at it through the neighborhood or the social structure lens, his neighborhood was one of extreme wealth. And that environment created its own kind of cultural deviance. The cultural norm there wasn't about survival. It was about entitlement. He grew up in this bubble where money could fix any problem, and that created this deep-seated sense that the rules just didn't apply to him.
Okay, now let's look at it through the friends and family or social process lens. Here, the focus shifts to what he actually learned. His parents, his main role models, basically taught him that privilege trumps responsibility. His social bond of belief, respecting the law, it was never really formed. So his behavior wasn't a product of poverty. It was a direct result of what he was taught by the people closest to him.
So, which theory wins? Is it the poverty of a rough neighborhood or the privilege of a mansion? Well, the answer, as it usually is a little more complicated than that.
The real takeaway here is that it's not an either-or question. It's both. Think of it like this. Social structure, your environment, it sets the stage. It creates the pressures, the strains, the opportunities, whether you're in a poor neighborhood or a wealthy one. But social process, your relationships, that writes the script. It teaches you how to act on that stage. So you see, the two theories aren't really competing. They're two sides of the very same coin.
And all of this leaves us with a really big, challenging question. Both of these theories suggest that these powerful social forces, whether they come from our zip code or our family dinner table, are constantly shaping our behavior. And if that's true, where does society's influence end and our own personal responsibility begin? That's definitely something worth thinking about.